Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. I've got a good topic for you today, a little not safe for work. Let's do it. What has been your most hair-raising, bone-chilling, let's get the hell out of here experience? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. In very early 2020, I was in Lumbini, Nepal. It's a small town built around this complex of ruins that was once the palatial home of Siddhartha Gautama. The Bodhi tree is located there. I was staying in a cheap hotel along a muddy road leading out of the city and was the only guest in the building. Many stray dogs roam the streets of that quarter at night, and you'd often hear them barking or getting into fights. This one night was particularly bad. A low fog had settled on the road, and the dogs were out in force, howling and barking. Out of nowhere came this bellowing roar, one so loud and sonorous, I felt it in my chest. Then, a vacuum of complete silence. All I could think of were ways to keep whatever had made that sound outside. The next day, I heard that a tiger had wandered over from a nearby reserve along the lake and eaten a few of the stray dogs. I'm a criminal defense investigator. I had a murder case involving two brothers. The one accused of the murders was very autistic, and his brother was a schizophrenic. The schizophrenic brother lived in a potato shack in the middle of the desert. I needed to talk to him several times throughout the course of the investigation, and since he didn't have a phone or electricity, I had to drive several hours out to his house and yell his name from the fence line until he came out of the shack. This investigation lasted for several years, and over time, I developed a rapport with the schizophrenic brother, and I kind of got to like him. He would talk your ear off about the aliens with golden eyes and the underground tunnels that connect all the Walmarts in the country. But he was pretty entertaining, and part of me wonders how much of it was show. Schizophrenic brother eventually gets a girlfriend. She's a tweaker who has mistaken his schizophrenia for meth-induced psychosis. I talked to her a few times in jail when she was sober, and she was surprisingly charming and insightful. The last time I go to see schizophrenic brother, it's a dark winter night, and tweaker girlfriend is there. She's lurking in the shadows and staring daggers at me the entire time I'm talking to him. I cut off his conversation about the speakers and his fillings and walk back to my truck to leave. A minute later, schizophrenic brother comes running out and tells me that he wants to show me something in his shack. He's never invited me inside before, and I'm not thrilled by the prospect. The whole thing feels off to me, so I tell him I have to get going and start the truck. The look of relief on his face when I declined to go inside convinced me that tweaker girlfriend was waiting behind the door with a hammer or something. A few months later, I learned that she shot him in his sleep and stashed his body in an old refrigerator. She has since pled guilty to his murder. In the world of you never knows and maybes, I think you made the right call. And what she did to him was horrible. A little bit different than the rest of the stories, but it gave me chills. My mom's best friend owns a farm about a half an hour from where I grew up. We went there nearly every weekend to help with upkeep and caring for our horses. All day, you could just feel a storm brewing. The wind, humidity, outside had a greenish tint, and the clouds rolling in as the sun was setting. Right after supper, it started raining hard. A lot of wind and lightning, too. I was looking out the window across the yard and thought I saw something above the barn on the far side of the yard. I was petrified. It looked like rotation in the clouds, and it started lowering down. I pointed it out to my dad. He said it was rain bouncing off the roof of the barn. We both looked out for a moment and clearly saw it suck back up into the clouds. I got goosebumps. We looked at each other for a second in disbelief. Then he shrugged and went back into the living room. I sheltered in the bathroom. The next day, we saw in the news that an F4 tornado ripped through a small town, Spencer, South Dakota, about 24 miles from where we were. I got chills when I saw the news reports. I must have been around 10 or 12 when this happened. I was walking back home one afternoon around 3 or 4 p.m. after strolling around the neighborhood, which was usually very safe, friendly, and quiet. I was on the opposite side of the block, the houses behind ours, which wasn't an issue because there happened to be a park that went across the whole block and connected to the other side. so you didn't have to go around the whole block. So I was only a few houses away. I went through the park, a park I had played at my entire childhood, without paying much attention. When about halfway through, this guy who I didn't know, definitely older than me, wearing a hoodie, started calling me. Dude, come over here one sec. What do you want? Come here, I just want to ask you something. Okay, ask me from over there. No, come over, please. No, tell me over there. At that point, another dude that was sitting next to him gets upset. I hear a, that's it, and they both stood up quickly and started making their way towards me. I can't recall how far they chased after me, but my instincts just told me to run like hell, and I did. To this day, I still don't know if they were going to mug me, if they were just taking the piss, or what was happening, but it definitely scared kid me. Used to work on an ambulance, and the company that I worked for had more ambulances than there were firehouses or medic stations to keep up with increasing call volumes. So we would do something called posting, which is where you park the ambulance somewhere within the area that you are servicing while you wait for a call. I was working the midnight to 10 a.m. shift one night, and it was really slow. On slow nights, we would try to find the darkest areas we could find to post in an attempt to catch some sleep. We found a church within a neighborhood whose parking lot had virtually no light, so we decided to park there. As soon as my partner put the rig in park, I instantly felt incredibly uncomfortable and unsafe. I didn't want to say anything to my partner, as I literally had no reason to feel the way I was, but the feeling was almost overwhelming. A few minutes go by, and my partner looks at me and says, "Hey man, I don't feel right. Something just feels off. You want to get out of here?" I replied yes, and we got the hell out of there. I've never really figured out why we both had the sensation and why it came out in the church's parking lot, but it sure did give me the creeps. Exploring an abandoned high-rise. Out of the blue, my friend grabbed me by the collar from behind. I was about to step into an elevator shaft. After swearing at him, "What the?" He looked and said, "Look." I saw a drop of like 20 floors to a concrete bottom with a broken metal rod sticking out. We went home. He saved my life, 100%. Once went urbexing in a storm drain on a nice summer day. We only intended to explore the first couple of 100 feet, but kept going. After a while, we could hear lots of water echoing in the distance, and I noticed the water level was a little higher with a bit more flow. My mate tried to convince me it was just a diverted river. We weren't having it though, and made us head back pronto. Stupid us didn't count on a freak rainstorm and managed to get out just as it got torrential. At a few points, weren't sure if where we were going to make it. Absolutely terrifying. Once when I was like 8 years old, I lived in a trailer park with mostly normal but occasionally sketchy folks around. I was really bored at home and asked my parents if I could walk up the street to my friend's house. Not very far, maybe just out of sight of my parents' trailer. It was like the middle of the day, and we knew a lot of people on our street, so my parents said yes. So here I am, an 8-year-old little girl, walking to my friend's house. Just as I got out of sight, I saw an adult man walking towards me straight ahead. I immediately had my alerts on, because I was alone, of course, and had never seen this dude before. I keep hoping he veers off in another course away from me, but he keeps coming towards me, and I notice his eyes are locked on me, and he's smiling. I got the creeps, but I was pretty close to my friend's house now. I looked around and realized there wasn't anyone else outside to witness anything. He finally gets close enough to say something to me, and this is what made me run. He said, "Hey, do you think you could take your shoes off? Please, I want to see your feet." And I said, "Huh? What?" And he asked me again to see my feet. Y'all, I turned around and sprinted so fast back to my house. I was terrified.
I guess I'm old-fashioned. I mean, forget about the fact that the person was going after a child and a predator, but feet?
Driving Uber one night a couple years back, I picked up 4 guys from a club. Listening to them talk, I realized that 2 guys, one of them ordered the ride, had met the other 2 at the club and were on their way to get coke from one of their cousins. There was an odd vibe. Some of the conversation didn't seem the most linear, and I was hyper aware that these drunk dumbasses were heading with 2 strangers to a drug deal, and I was the one driving them. I did not want drugs in my car, and I was very aware that we might be on the way to an ambush. If we'd been heading anywhere remote or sketchy, I had to figure out how to end the ride. The two wannabe dealers kept trying to get in touch with their cousin via cell phone, went to an apartment just off a main street, and after both had gone into the building, I just said, "Should we leave?" to the guys, and we did. I still don't know if it was just a ploy for a free ride, guys too drunk or dumb to pull off a basic coke deal, or something nefarious that didn't finish. Ventured deep into an abandoned mine shaft on a mountainside on the island of Tasmania. We got to a point deep in the tunnel that was covered with hundreds of massive orb weaver sliders, and we started hearing echoes of weird-ass sounds. Decided to turn back. My wife and I were on a search mission for some missing fern pickers. We were volunteers with the local search and rescue SAR team, and we decided to stay in the search area that night and had built a pretty nice fire. We were sitting there, and it was about 0200, hoping this dude would wander into camp. I had heard animals around us throughout the night, no surprise. We're in the middle of the woods. I'm used to animals stalking around outside my camp. I knew there were two animals, one each side of us. It was at about that point when we heard a bird chirp. It came from about the place I figured out one of the animals were, then another from the opposite side. I immediately realized we were being watched and stalked by at least two cougars. We very quickly climbed back into my truck. It's got a camper shell and is outfitted for truck camping. I was walking to school one day a month before I graduated from high school last year. This old man across the street yelled out to me, telling me his name. He came up to me, telling me that he was looking for a lady to marry. He asked for my name and then asked if he could see me later. I naturally said no, but he kept asking. I told him that I was still in high school. Rather than backing off, he asked for my age. I told him that I was 18. Then he kept asking to see me later. I eventually just said sure, to get him off my back. I walked away and my school bus picked me up. I later learned he had a reputation for this. I also learned that when he was drunk, he once broke into a couple's house and wore the woman's pants. When I was 16 or 17, I was texting with a friend's older brother, 19 to 20, who was a local paramedic. He was sweet on me. Love bombing sweet. At that age, I didn't know better and just loved the idea that an older guy was so sweet on me. I'd only met him in person once at a ball game. One day, he randomly showed up to the little countryside cafe I worked at. He insisted I take his Letterman, even though it was in the heat of summer. It was weird, but he was insistent, so I took it. We kept texting, and things got weird and possessive. I got scared and basically ghosted him. I never told him where I lived, but not even a few days later, I was home alone, way out in the middle of nowhere, with my younger stepsister, and I hear banging on the door. It was him. He was yelling for me to come out right away, beating the door. It was an old, rundown, single-wide trailer, so nothing was really home invader-proofed. He started kicking the door hard. The whole trailer was shaking, throwing stuff at the windows and screaming. I got my mom's shotgun, hid my stepsister in the closet, and called the police. It felt like forever. He didn't stop until I heard tires on the gravel pull up. A cop came inside and said he claimed I stole his Letterman and class ring, and was just there to get his stuff back. The ring was in the jacket pocket, but I didn't know. I gave it to the cop, and I don't know what happened to him, but needless to say, there was not future contact. I still don't know how he learned where I lived.
Some guys just really know how to make a woman not want to date anybody. What a garbage person. Glad that you had the shotgun and took care of business.
Back when my son was only about a year old, my husband worked second shift, so I was alone every evening. We lived in townhouses at the time, had a neighbor who was a war vet my husband was friendly with. He was a little off in the sense there was very obvious PTSD and other traumas, but all around nice dude. Anyway, one evening this guy knocked on the door. I opened it thinking he probably was looking for my husband, and I was just going to let him know he was working. Dude was super drunk, wouldn't stop talking, and kind of made his way into the house. He also brought his huge-ass German Shepherd with him. I was trying to be friendly, but I had the worst feeling in my stomach. I felt insanely vulnerable, and like something just wasn't right with the situation. I kept trying to tell him in the nicest way to leave, but he wouldn't. I texted my husband, A neighbor guy's here and won't leave. He's trashed. I feel really uncomfortable. My husband texted his buddies that lived a few apartments down, and they came over immediately. They got the dude out of the house, and not even 20 minutes later, I hear noises outside, and this guy is trying to rip the license plate off my car. My husband's friends heard it or saw it, I'm not really sure, but they came over and were more aggressive about him going home and leaving me alone, and he did, so I thought. A few hours later, my husband gets home and sees this guy hanging out crouched behind some cars. He goes up to him to ask him exactly what the F he's doing. I don't know the exact details because I stayed hiding in the house, but this guy had ropes and some other weapons on him and full intentions of raping me that night. It makes me sick to think that if my husband's friends wouldn't have come over as fast as they did to help me, my poor son would have been watched something horrible happen to me, or even what he would have done to my child.